Shameless was one of the most emotionally compelling TV series I've ever had the pleasure of seeing. Raw, brutal, funny, and most importantly, real. Besides impeccable writing, it was mainly the convincing performances that kept viewers' attention, including my own. Every single performance from these incredibly talented actors was on point. Not only that, but everyone had their own story arc. Everyone was going through shit. I did occasionally feel like, Jesus Christ, how many bad things can happen to this poor family? But I think that was the point. These characters weren't meant to be heroes. These characters weren't meant to be these larger-than-life figures. They were meant to be you and me. At no point in the show's insane 11-season-long runtime did anything really good happen to any of these characters. Here and there were minor victories, but nothing really good happened, with the exception of Fiona. Fiona's departure from the show at the climax of season 9 was perfect. It was very fitting, finally freeing her from the burdens of taking care of her family and letting her finally be able to move out of the South Side and begin her life. She always did what she had to do for everyone else, but in the end she got to do what was best for her. Very nice. The road to this series' conclusion was rocky to say the least, but like all things, it eventually has to end. And man, did they drop the ball for this show's end. My God. With all of the hardships that the Gallagher's had to face throughout, ideally by the end, these characters would finally find some peace. They would finally gain something, whether this be a partner or a wife, a good job, a nice home, something that would give some closure to these characters that we've been following for so long. The 11th season sees the Gallagher's selling their infamous home so that each family member would get some money that would enable them to find a new home and start their lives. The only character that really got some decent closure was Ian, finally being married to Mickey and finding a suitable home to begin their lives together, even thinking about potentially adopting a kid. Very peaceful. Everyone else though, their end is either left unclear or straight up unsatisfying, in my opinion of course. First of all, Fiona is absent for this show's end. Now, she was the main character for the majority of the show's runtime, and she's only shown briefly in a flashback. It's absolutely abhorrent to me that the show's creators did not insist on her being present, since her presence on the show was so fucking vital, even if it was just her voice. Imagine if the family received a phone call from Fiona and she spoke some kind words to her family, evoking some sense of ease and trying to help them during a difficult time. But no, as I said earlier, at least she got the ending she deserved in season 9, but her not being here in the end was just not okay to me. She definitely should have been here. For Frank, I think that it was poetic and sort of appropriate for him to finally die. I mean, he lived a life of debauchery and he was incredibly selfish and he was a pretty much dickhead the entire show, so it was very appropriate for him to die. Although this finale focused mainly on Frank floating over Chicago, ascending into heaven, which, as supernatural as this is visually, he should not have been focused on that much. After a few seasons, this show became more about the rest of the Gallaghers as opposed to him. After season 4, 5, maybe 6, every time he was on screen, it felt like he was there because he had to be there, even though there was really no point for him being around anymore. His suicide letter was cool since the show began with Frank narrating about his family and ended the same way. Kevin and Veronica, same thing. At a certain point, these two characters became sort of irrelevant. Once the kids started moving around and pretty much none of the Gallaghers really had any contact with them, for the most part, why did the show feel the need to have them? I guess you could say that the alibi room was important, so they kept them as part of the show, but honestly, along with Frank, Kevin and Veronica became merely side characters. They just didn't need to be there. I do think that them moving out of Chicago was nice though, I'll give them that. Lip, easily the best character on the show, only got one sentence from Ian depicting his importance, admitting that Lip was always like the father of the family, which he was. Remember in season 4 when he basically took care of his whole family, even a sick Frank, baby Liam, alcoholic professor, and a downward spiraling Fiona, all while attempting to keep it together to finish college at MIT? Yeah, that felt good. But again, his end was unclear. We don't learn if he takes the offer for the home or if Tammy is pregnant again, and his biggest character attribute of a genius level IQ was never put to good use in the end. That really separated him from all of his siblings, yet it meant nothing ultimately. Missed opportunity if you ask me. He was absolutely the strongest character on the show, so nuanced and tormented by his inner demons, but still able to be intellectually gifted and able to be the father of his siblings. It hurt me that his end was left unclear and they didn't have him grow into his full potential. With Carl potentially buying the alibi room, he should have had more of a Robin in The Dark Knight Rises sort of end, disillusioned with the traditional forms of justice and wanting more, and finding finding it somewhere else. For season 11, he was finally a cop, a badass one at that, but throughout, he finds himself out of sync with all sorts of cops who he's partnered with, all of whom are corrupted in some way, him being the only one wanting to truly help the people and put away bad guys. Now he's gonna own a bar and tend to these corrupted assholes? No, terrible end for him. How about having him join the army or something, or becoming a private investigator? Something to put his desire for justice to good use. Like Lip, this attribute separated him from his siblings, and they wasted it in the end. And then there's Liam, who doesn't really get an end. I mean, he's told by Lip that he could live with him and Tammy, which is okay since he's only like 11 or 12 and he still needs to get through school. And this whole thing during season 11 was not knowing where he'd end up. Everyone's moving on. Where is he gonna go? Who's he gonna live with? So it was nice to see that, okay, Lip and him would live together. That's cool. I also think it would have been nice to see him in a brief flash forward living with Lip, helping take care of Fred and finally having a normal teenage life. And then there's Debbie, easily the worst written character on the show. Emma Kenny is a fine actress. It's really not her fault. It's just the way her character was written. She decided at age 15 to have a baby against Fiona and everyone else's urges not to, since she'd inevitably be doomed as a teenage single mom who will most likely struggle and end up hopeless, which she does. Instead of her finding a job suitable to take care of her daughter, she ends up running away to Texas with a criminal, most likely putting her and her daughter's future in jeopardy. Really? That's the best they could do? Like, it's almost offensive that that's the way they ended it. Are you kidding me? She annoyed the hell out of me throughout the show, and she was so stubborn and idiotic. Why couldn't she have finally had a moment of clarity, stop running away and just embrace the future with her chin held up high? She admits that she didn't want her home sold because she wanted Franny to grow up like she did, surrounded by family, and that's totally valid. But why not end the show with her finding a truly sincere group of friends, or finding a community of women like her so she's around like-minded people? I was contemplating whether or not I should even make this video, or whether I should do like a retrospective video on Shameless, breaking down the scenes, talking about the best and worst story arcs, and maybe I will. But given that the show is finally over, I felt it would be more apt to talk about the show's finale. Ultimately, it was one of those shows that honestly could have gone on forever given how awesome the performances were. Shameless will always be one of my favorite shows, one that portrayed dysfunction, poverty, and hopelessness in a way that I could not stop watching. The show really knew how to tell intimate stories that were funny while at the same time full of despair. It found the right balance most of the time, but in the end, the show just couldn't stick the landing. It didn't end on a satisfying note, in my opinion, of course. I'm not one of those people who thinks that everything has to have a happy ending, a fairy tale ending. I'm aware that sometimes a more sad ending is better, but with this show, I desperately wanted it to end on a high note. I wanted these characters to finally find peace in some way, shape, or form. Now, you might think that the show had a fantastic ending, and that's fine, because we are allowed to have our own opinions. You might think that the show ending with the Gallaghers collectively celebrating some gentrifying rich asshole's car set ablaze was appropriate. However, I think that these characters deserved a better ending, an ending that was inspiring, an ending that paid off all the misery and all the bullshit that these kids were forced to endure. In the end, these characters might have ended up worse than when their story began, which is poignantly disappointing. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, comment, subscribe to the channel. I'd be more than appreciative if you did. Have a great day. I will see y'all next week. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.